Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our February 16th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler. Today, we're going to highlight a couple of Iowa programs that help the next generation get a foothold in farming, including one program that helps young farmers who aren't planning to take over a farm from a family member, and another program that's going to appeal to young folks who are wanting to take over the farm from their parents or grandparents. The first one is the Building Your Livestock Legacy program through the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers. If you're one of our regular podcast listeners, you know that the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers is the first contact we recommend to folks who are looking to make changes on their livestock farms. Whether that's siting a new barn, taking steps to enhance neighbor relations, preparing for an inspection, or just ensuring compliance with the many rules and regulations that apply to livestock. For more on the Coalition and their program for young and aspiring livestock farmers, here's Spokesman Editor Tom Block with the Executive Director of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, Brian Waddingham.
Brian, it's been a little while since we've had a chance to talk to you. So to start off, catch us up on what the Coalition has been doing over the last few months and the kind of calls that you've been fielding.
Yeah, so the Coalition staff, we've been pretty busy fielding a lot of calls about adding new cattle facilities, new dairy facilities, as well as some inquiries about raising poultry, both egg laying and broiler production. So despite a lot of the challenges that are out there, I think for the most part, livestock and poultry producers are feeling somewhat optimistic.
Livestock markets overall have been one of the few bright spots in an otherwise tough farm economy. Has that resulted in this uptick in calls that you're seeing?
I think so. Several of the farmers that I've worked with have just made the comment that, it might make more sense to walk your corn across the scale through livestock or poultry than it would be just selling it to the co-op. So I think that's really helping drive some of this, as well as, the Daisy plant moving in to Boone. That'll start producing in another year or so, but I think that's going to provide some opportunities for dairies and then hopefully some cattle feedlots to finish off some of those calves as well.
So yeah, really, it sounds like opportunities across a variety of livestock sectors. You mentioned several different species there. So depending upon what someone's set up for or interested in, maybe an opportunity for them to look into.
Yeah, and that's what we spend so much of our time doing is a lot of farmers just want to talk through opportunities that are out there. And then once, maybe we hit on something they like, then that's okay. Well, would a facility like that work on my farm? Who do I need to talk to? What about financing? So then we start to connect some of those dots and can refer them to the companies that are looking to put in birds or hogs or whatever the case may be, shrimp, and then really work with them to find a lender, talk about cost share programs, low interest loan programs, and just try to make it as easy on them as we can. And when we leave the farm that day, hopefully they've got a good plan for the future and one that they can be responsible and successful in pulling off.
And we know those major species, like you mentioned, are cattle, hogs, poultry, the things we think about. But you mentioned shrimp there, and aquaculture has been one of those markets. We've seen some different ventures come and go over the years, but it sounds like there's some real momentum and markets building now, especially for farm-raised shrimp. So what kind of growth are you seeing today in that market?
So we're working a lot with a company out of Central Iowa called Midland Company. They have some contract growers now. There's 6 contract growers throughout the state of Iowa that are raising shrimp for him. In 2026, he's looking to add another 6 growers. I think he does have a contract with a retailer here in Iowa to sell the shrimp. I think this one's here to stay. The technology that he uses in those facilities, very little waste. It's like less than 0.5% of water exchanged per day out of the tank. So very environmentally friendly. The farmers that we've talked to, that we've worked with, seem to really like growing shrimp, and it's a fair contract. And, I think it's just another opportunity today for farmers to diversify, whether it's just to kind of spread out your own portfolio or even to bring a son or daughter back to the farm. You kind of got to look at all options today, and shrimp is just one more that we've added to that list of possible livestock or poultry to grow here.
And from the articles that I've read, it can really fit a variety of different operations, like you say, whether it's bringing somebody back to the farm or somebody who has it as a side business. It doesn't take a very big footprint. You can kind of make it fit your space that you have.
Yeah, we've worked with one guy to put shrimp in an old hog barn. Someone else converted an old smaller warehouse to raise shrimp. There are some brand new standalone facilities that have been built. So yeah, it just all depends. And that's one of the, I think the attractive things about shrimp farming here in the state of Iowa is if you've got an existing facility, we can probably retrofit it to raise shrimp in. And, that could save you potentially a lot of money, not building new and utilizing another building that you've already got on the farm.
So let's shift gears a little bit, talk about another program. Just over a year ago, the coalition launched a program called the Building Your Livestock Legacy program. What's the response to that program been like, and what activities have you been doing over the past year?
Yeah, so response to the Building Your Livestock Legacy program has been overly positive. We've got just under 200 people enrolled in the class now. And this is just simply curriculum that we put on Google Classroom. You can learn at your own speed. There's 24 videos with 3 to 5 quiz questions at the end of each that you can complete. But it's about topics that we find maybe young people, beginning farmers aren't fully prepared for when they walk in and talk to their lender. So it's things like developing a business plan, financing 101, how to figure cash flows, low interest loan, cost share programs that are available to young people and established farmers as well today. So we just kind of run through the whole gamut of resources that are available. But then also there's another prong to this program, and that is working with established farmers that don't have heirs of their own to come back to the farm and take it over. So our hope is that we have established farmers that are calling us saying, hey, I raise hogs or I raise cattle, I'm in this county, really would like a young person or a young couple to partner with because I want to keep my legacy going. I've been raising cows for 50 years. I've got some really good genetics, and I don't just want to sell the cows. I want somebody to utilize them and keep the whole thing going.
Let's talk a little bit more about the training modules in the first part of that program you talked about. With the challenging economy, it's more important than ever for farmers to be financially prepared when they're having those conversations with their lenders. And these modules are taught by those lenders who are involved with this. So really, you're getting people prepared for the actual questions that their lenders are going to want to talk about.
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's 24 experts that take on each of these lessons on video. So you're talking to people that are overseeing the programs that we're going to refer farmers to anyway. So it's really convenient if I'm on a farm visit or a farmer calls in and has specific questions. It's a lot of information to take in. But now I can say, well, if you want to learn more about the Beginning Farmer Loan Program, go to the Building Your Livestock Legacy program and go to the Iowa Finance Authority video. And it's all explained right there. And the great thing, these videos are 6 to 8 minutes in length. So a lot of great information and, you're not spending a ton of time on it. We figure you can go through the whole class in probably 3 to 4 hours. And if you want the certificate, you just need to put together a resume, a financial statement, and a balance sheet, send that to us, and then you get your certificate. But the goal would be you can take that certificate to your lender, show them that you are really serious about raising livestock, or you can take it to maybe the neighbor down the road that's got some empty facilities, and you can make a pitch. Hey, I would really like to raise cattle or hogs. Can we partner here and work something out to where I can maybe work into your operation? So it's a great program. One thing I would mention, we've got interest from all ages. Obviously, those under 18, there's more interest there, but our second highest category is those over 50 years of age. So that tells me that there's maybe more of a need out there to do some matchmaking with those established farmers and the aspiring farmer to get them linked up and put together so they can start continuing their livestock legacy and the other can start theirs.
And I think with some of these loan programs, just to be able to go in and pick that module, even if you completed the whole program, to go back and what was that about the beginning farmer or any FSA loan program, right? Because they're pretty complicated.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point with FSA and the beginning farmer loan program. All those programs can be mashed up together. So you don't just have to do one, but it does take somebody that is very familiar with those programs. Jamie Ungs is a banker. He does a great job explaining how that works. Brian Gosling with FSA is on the video. He can talk about that as well as Tammy Nibola with the Iowa Finance Authority. So you've got experts at your fingertips that can explain the programs before you go into your county office and have that conversation with local staff.
Now, the other aspect of the program, as you described, was making connections with some more established farmers. Are there some specific examples of successful connections that have been made through the Livestock Legacy Program?
We are working with several established farmers in different counties. We're trying to pair them up with young people. It is a little trickier than what you think, because not everybody, maybe if you're from southern Iowa, wants to move to north central Iowa or vice versa. But there is some work being done, and we hope that there's going to be some things coming together very soon where we have matched up young people with those established farmers that are looking for somebody to carry on their legacy.
Yeah, and this is really important, as you've mentioned to me before. These genetics don't just happen overnight. So to be able to build these livestock facilities and these herds up over time, people want to see that continue into the future.
Yeah, and I think, too, you've kind of got a mentor then, too. You've got questions about feeding cattle or what type of vet care that you've currently got them on or whatever. But to have that mentor there and can give you some advice and some input, but yet stay kind of hands off and let you do the day-to-day stuff, I think is really invaluable, especially in today's world where everything costs so much. And if you just purchase cattle or hogs and you want to see them maximize their efficiency. So having a built-in mentor, I think, means a lot to these young people.
And just like with the loan programs, there are a number of different ways farms can be passed along, either within the family or outside the family. Just a lot of planning that has to go into that.
Yeah, we've got Dr. Hansen from Nebraska University on there, and he talks a little bit about just the different ways to look at things. There are so many tax incentives and tax credits out there, but boy, for the average person to know about them, you really need to work with somebody and watch these videos and gather as much information as you can to see what is best for what you want to do.
So how can farmers who are interested in this program get signed up or get more information?
So the best way is to visit our website, supportfarmers.com. You can click on the Building Your Livestock Legacy tab. That will trigger an email being sent to you that you do accept the terms of the program. And then after that, you are free to begin on Lesson 1, which is a little overview from our Secretary of Agriculture here in the state of Iowa, Mike Nagg. And then you can get right into the rest of the videos and don't have to go in order. You can skip around to maybe what interests you the most. We just would like to see as many people get involved in this program to just kind of give them a little bit better education on the financing and lending process.
And we take for granted, but it's important to mention that all of your services, including this program, are free to the user.
Yeah, that's right. All of our programs are free and confidential due to the generous support of Iowa's 9 major farm and commodity groups.
Brian, one last thing here. Spring right around the corner. It's a good time to start thinking about some of those things. Planting trees with your Green Farmstead program, or if people are thinking about making changes to handle runoff from spring rainfall, or just to make sure their farm meets all the rules for inspections. What are some of those things farmers should be thinking about here as spring approaches?
You mentioned several of them. Right now, if you're wanting to maybe start building a new cattle facility or hog or poultry, dairy, shrimp, now's the time to give us a call. We can talk to you over the phone, or we can come right out to your farm and visit with you one-on-one or your family one-on-one and just kind of talk through your options, answer any questions that you have. And, also now's a great time. I know this winter's been pretty mild as far as snowfall, but it's going to snow some more. Hopefully it's going to rain some more this spring. So if you've got questions about your open feedlots and if they would be in compliance with Iowa DNR, give us a call. We can come out and do an assessment of your feedlot and give you peace of mind that, yes, you would pass an inspection, or maybe there's a few things you need to change. But again, all those services are available at no charge and confidential.
And we do it all year round, but if people have those questions, get it done here before they get busy planting, right?
Yeah. Give us a call now. So when the weather gets fit in April, you can start planting right away.
And again, those contact numbers and website, how they can get a hold of you and your staff.
You can find us online at supportfarmers.com or give us a call anytime at 800-932-2436.
Thanks, Brian. We all know it's tough to get started in farming, so it's good to have a program that gives young farmers some really tangible ways to break into agriculture. If you'd like to learn more about the Building Your Livestock Legacy program or the many other services offered by the Coalition to support Iowa's farmers, confidentially and free of charge, use the link we've provided down in the notes for this podcast episode or head out to supportfarmers.com. Okay, we already alluded to the fact that it can be challenging to find your way into farming when you're not taking over the farm from a family member. But that doesn't mean that transitioning a farm from one family member to another is simple either. In fact, it's often pretty complicated. That's why Iowa Farm Bureau has Take Root, a free program for Iowa Farm Bureau members that has helped thousands of farm families develop succession plans over the past 13 years. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need to draft or refine your family's farm succession plan, you'll want to attend one of our Take Root workshops. We actually have 2 workshops coming up soon, February 17th in Cherokee and February 26th in Waukon. And if you miss those, we'll have more Take Root workshops coming up this summer. Frankly, with all of the immediate pressures facing today's farmers, it can be tempting to put off farm succession discussions or just assume that things will take care of themselves. That's a mistake you don't want to make. Take it from Ron Rabou, a Wyoming farmer and author who learned about the difficulties of farm succession firsthand. Ron shared his story and farm succession tips with Farm Bureau members at Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting in December. That's where he caught up with spokesman writer Bob Beyond.
Would you mind sharing your background, your farm, your journey, and what experiences led you to focus so deeply on farm succession and helping families move from planning to doing?
My name is Ron Rabou. I'm from southeastern Wyoming. I'm a farmer out there, 5th generation Wyomingite, actually. My family moved from Illinois, of all places, and ended up in southeastern Wyoming. So grew up on a cattle ranch out there, and through just a course of events, my life changed. And, I think that a lot of times in production agriculture, we just kind of feel like when you're born into it, like I was, it almost feels like it's your destiny. It's like something that you just have this inborn fondness for, something you have a passion for. Although the way things turned out for me, I never actually planned on doing what I'm doing today. So going to talk about that story today and how that relates to farm transition and farm succession planning and why that is so important. This is a subject that many of us in production agriculture don't like to talk about. I always tell people that it's almost like it's the white elephant in the room, that everyone knows that it exists and everyone knows that it's there, but we just kind of want to ignore it. But I hope that my story will compel folks and we'll call them to action, to realize that the longer you table these things and the longer you set them aside, the worse it gets. And that just because you set it aside we'll have a conversation about that in the future, next year, 5 years, 10 years, it'll work itself out. It will work itself out, but generally it just produces the results that you don't want.
For a lot of families, even starting the conversation about transition is emotional and uncomfortable, like you mentioned. Why is it so difficult, and what's the best way to open that door and get everyone talking in a productive way?
When we talk about farm succession and transition, one of the things that really prevents people from addressing it is the emotional side. There's consultants you can go to, there's attorneys you can go to, there's accountants you can go to address a lot of the business issues that need to be worked out among families. But if we're not purposeful and vigilant in making sure that we address the emotional side of the equation, then all of those business discussions and all of those plans really in the end don't matter. Because what I want to focus on is really figuring out a way to retain and maintain family relationships. because that is really one of the most important things that we have in this world is those relationships. And we have a tendency to allow businesses and money and assets to really get in the way of that. And it's important that we focus on the emotional side, because the other stuff we can figure out, but the emotional side just has a tendency to destroy those relationships. So how do we address that? We really have to address that by having honest conversations with each other. And that is a whole lot easier said than it is done, because having those conversations can be extremely intimidating. It can be extremely frustrating. A lot of times we have these pent up feelings and emotions that are pretty raw a lot of times. And a lot of times we don't really want to express how we're feeling. But my plea to everyone will be that if you just share those, you'll find that you're not the only person that has those. It's much like in anything that when we're in a meeting or when we're in a family gathering or a business meeting or whatever, that we're maybe thinking something or feeling something, but as soon as someone says it, we all say, oh, well, I'm kind of feeling that way too, right? So we just have to really get out there. So communication, first and foremost, the absolutely most important thing to do.
You said many families need to move from thinking about succession to actually acting on it. What does that mindset shift look like, and why is it so difficult for farm families?
I think it's difficult for farm families, and I don't think that they're unique in that. I think that it's difficult for human nature to do that. It's always easier to talk about doing things than to actually do them. We can spend months and years or decades talking about things without ever acting on them. And so I always go back to the example that I use with my own children. So I have 3 boys, and we have a 4-day school week in our district. And so they'll come home on Thursday evening, throw their backpack to the side, and then Sunday night at 10 o'clock, oh, I forgot, I got all this homework I got to do. And so what they do is they think about it Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Sunday night, panic mode, right? So what I tell them is that if you'll just come home, instead of throwing your backpack to the side, take literally, I mean, it might be 10 minutes of homework, it might be 30 minutes of homework, but rarely is it more than that. If you'll just focus on doing that and that only for that period of time, you can enjoy your weekend. And then when Sunday night comes around, there's not a panic moment. So I hope that my story will be somewhat of a call to action to folks. And I hope that it will be insightful enough that they will say, wow, we don't want that to happen to us. So what do we need to do, and what are our triggers of our calls to action to make sure that we have these conversations so we can begin to move things forward?
From your experience, what would be some of the most common roadblocks that stop farm succession from moving forward, and how do you overcome them?
Oh, we have a tendency to just want to just go farm. If we're having some kind of an issue at home, or we're having some kind of an issue with our partners or family, then we just go get in a tractor and we just go farm. And that's what we do to ignore it. And ignoring it doesn't cause it to go away. It just exacerbates the problem. It just makes it bigger. What we have to do is we have to be willing to say, okay, I need to look at myself. I need to accept change. And I need to have the self-discipline to be willing to sit down with my family and be honest. That's a huge key that, look, I'm not comfortable having this conversation, and maybe none of you are comfortable having this conversation, but for the sake of the family, for the sake of the relationships, and for the sake of the survivability of the actual operation, we need to have these conversations. We need to be honest with each other, and let's maybe agree to disagree on some things to figure out where we can find a happy middle ground so we can continue moving things forward.
Are there any horror stories or challenging stories that you can share?
There are plenty of horror stories. So here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that death causes people to change. And while people are alive, and particularly while the matriarch or the patriarch are alive, things have a tendency to be subdued. But usually when one or both of those people are gone, all heck can break loose. And that is exactly what happened in my life. And people want to learn about my story and learn about some of the things that I've had to go through in my life. I've written a couple of books, but my latest book is called Make Your Own Way. That can be found on my website, raboufarms.com, or it can be found on Amazon. I have a new audio book that is out. I read the book personally, and then one of my good friends is interviewing me after each one of those chapters, and we dive into some of those stories.
Well, when a family is ready to move forward, what does a strong, practical succession plan actually include? Not just a document, but a living roadmap the family can use and update.
That's going to involve constant communication.
Okay.
Any document that is produced needs to be flexible. It needs to make sure that it meets the needs of everyone that's involved. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be spelled out clearly enough. So there needs to be a very clear, defined roles, responsibilities, future plans, and structures for that particular business on how it moves forward. Now, the hard thing about farm succession planning is that there is not a one-size-fits-all. And I think that really goes back to the fact that if we see an attorney, a lot of times it's a boilerplate system. But your individual operation is different from anyone else's. Your family dynamics are different from anyone else's. And so that needs to be customized. And I think really that what it has to involve is it has to involve a team of people planning that together. So what I mean by that is attorneys, accountants, financial planners, ag consultants, life coaches. It can involve all of those things to make sure that that plan is all encompassing.
Let's take that maybe a step further and talk a little bit about how a family might navigate a situation like that, where some of the children are active in the operation and maybe some aren't. How do you balance fairness with protecting the viability of the farm?
That is a question that only you can answer as a family. It's not a level playing field, right? So not everyone's situation is the same. Your situation is unique. So again, it goes back to communication. It goes back to understanding the wants, needs, and desires of the people who are there and the people who are not, and being clear about what those plans are. One of the worst things that we can do is say, well, you'll understand why I did what I did when I'm gone. Well, that's a great formula for destroying your family. I've seen it time and time again. I've seen it in my own family. It is a horrible, horrible idea. And a lot of times, even the best plans can completely go awry. And we have to go into that understanding that. And so there are solutions for that. But again, all of those are unique. And we have to always keep in mind that there's this saying, and many people have heard it before, that fair isn't equal and equal isn't fair.
Right.
And just because you're one of four siblings doesn't mean that you get 25% of the shares of a particular operation. But that needs to be communicated before something happens so that everyone's on the same page. Again, the focus has to be on maintaining relationships, and the first and foremost way that we do that is through communication.
Yeah, so obviously communication is number one. That is the top thing. We've got to sit down and talk about things. Share a few of the biggest mistakes you might see in farm succession and what maybe a family could do differently if they've run across that.
Well, I can tell you from my own story that my family was very intentional about their estate planning. There was a clearly defined buy-sell agreement. Mm-hmm. There was a clearly defined operating agreement. There was a clearly defined division of partnership shares. Mm-hmm. But there were unintended consequences as a result of that because there was not open and honest communication that involved. There was a 2-word clause in our estate plan that completely foiled the entire plan altogether. And that 2-word clause was a sons only provision. And that sons only provision ultimately destroyed my family's share of the actual operation. That could have been solved But it wasn't solved because we didn't ask honest questions. You know, some of the partners that were involved in the operation didn't even have sons. And so you want to talk about clear and open communication. How come we're not talking about that? How come we're not laying out that on the table? We're just assuming that everything's going to work out. Right? So we cannot draw upon assumptions. So number one, unintended consequences, because we didn't actually sit down and have open communications, which is what a life coach and what a good ag consultant can do for you that an accountant and an attorney can't do for you. Those are numbers guys. Those are legal guys. Those are systems guys. Those aren't necessarily people that are going to address the emotional side of the equation. That's the most important part of the conversation altogether. So the other part of it is saying, well, things will work out. They will work out, but they'll just never produce the results that you were after.
Well, let's end with this. I know at the end of the day, succession isn't just about land or assets. It's about family, the emotions, values, and the future. What do you hope farm families keep in perspective as they go through this process? And what legacy do you hope yours reflects?
Understanding what their why is. If we don't understand what our why is, then any path will do. But if we're purposeful and thoughtful and we gain the right perspective and introspection to understand who we are as people and what drives us and where we actually want to go, are we just doing what we're doing because this is what our family has always done? Or are we doing what we're doing, heading where we're going, because this is exactly the path that we want to take in our life? So we have to be purposeful in understanding and creating that introspection about what our why is. I will challenge people today that most of us don't know what our why is. Most of us end up just kind of floating like we're much like myself. You know, you just kind of end up in a family operation. You say, well, I guess this is my destiny, and this is, I guess, what my passion's supposed to be because I'm raised up in doing this, without necessarily sitting down and saying, is this really what I want to do? So the other part of that is having a true understanding of what legacy actually is. We may all define it in different ways. And typically how we define it is we define it in a way that is measurable, right? It's measurable in the sense that we can measure assets, we can measure equipment, we can measure finances, we can measure cash flow, all of those things. Your legacy isn't your farm. Your legacy is who you are and who you teach your children to be. And that's where true legacy comes from, because if we can equip and empower our children and our grandchildren to think for themselves, to understand how to solve problems, to understand what their why is, they can be successful in everything that we do. And what a powerful legacy that is.
There's no time like the present. If you're ready to develop or refine your farm's succession plan, be sure to check out Iowa Farm Bureau's Take Root program at iowafarmbureau.com/take root. Before we wrap up this episode, I'll mention one more program for you to consider. Looking at today's landscape and into the future, it's apparent that the opportunities for new and aspiring farmers may look very different than things looked for previous generations. That's one reason Iowa Farm Bureau created its Acres of Opportunity Conference. The Acres of Opportunity Conference is a day-long event featuring farmers and others with expertise in niche crop and livestock opportunities. Everything from meat, goats, and honey to berries and agritourism. This year's Acres of Opportunity Conference is February 21st in Spencer, Iowa. So if you're hearing this episode before noon on February 18th, there's still time to get registered for this year's event. You can learn more and get signed up at iowafarmbureau.com or by clicking the link down in the notes for this episode. That's all for this edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. We hope you found it helpful and that you'll join us for our next episode on March 2nd. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.